Imagine you've just harvested the best yield of your career. The bins are full, the quality is high, and for the first time in years, the weather actually cooperated. But as you sit in the farm office looking at the ledger, the feeling isn't one of triumph. It's a cold, sinking realization that doing everything right, maximizing every bushel and optimizing every acre, is no longer enough to keep the lights on. You are standing on what we call a burning platform, an economic model that is literally disintegrating beneath your feet even as you produce more than ever before. This isn't just a bad year or a temporary dip in the cycle. We are witnessing a historic and violent correction that has wiped out the record-breaking nominal profits of 2022. That year, U.S. net farm income reached a staggering peak of $182 billion. It felt like a new era of prosperity. But in just 24 months, $42 billion of that wealth has simply vanished. By the end of 2024, that income figure plummeted toward $140 billion, representing a 23% collapse in the blink of an eye. The reason this platform is burning is because the traditional link between what you pay for inputs and what you get for your crop has been severed. Historically, when grain prices took a dive, the cost of fertilizer, seed, and fuel would eventually follow suit. But that's not what's happening now. Total production expenses have stayed locked at record highs, while crop cash receipts have plummeted from $300 billion to just $246 billion. You are being crushed by a cost-price squeeze that is structurally rooted in a world that has become much more expensive to operate in, but no more willing to pay for what you grow. Look at the numbers on your chemical shelf. Over the last decade, general inflation across the economy rose by about 32%. But in that same window, your chemical costs surged by 80%, and the price of the machinery sitting in your shed jumped by 63%. You aren't just fighting the market. You're fighting a decoupled industrial supply chain that doesn't care if corn is at $4 or $6. For a corn or soybean producer today, the math has become a trap. Break-even prices are now trending above $5 per bushel for corn and $12 for soybeans. When market prices dip below those levels, every bushel you produce isn't adding to your wealth, it's accelerating your loss. This is the yield paradox. The harder you work to produce volume, the faster you burn through your liquidity. This crisis is hitting the missing middle the hardest. While 86% of farms in the U.S. are small family operations, they only account for a tiny 17% of total production value. These farms often operate with profit margins of less than 10%, leaving them with zero breathing room when a sudden input shock or interest rate hike hits. Meanwhile, the giant, large-scale operations, those with over $10 million in median wealth, have the scale to negotiate, the capital to automate, and the buffers to survive the fire. We also have to talk about the hidden hand in the market. Globally, governments pour $842 billion into agricultural support every single year. On the surface, that sounds like a safety net, but the reality is far more cynical. Two-thirds of that support is provided in ways that actually distort the market, often inflating the price of the land you rent and the inputs you buy rather than actually landing in your pocket as net income. In some cases, as much as 75% of that support is leaked straight back to the large suppliers and landlords, leaving you to manage the risk while they capture the reward. And the risk is only getting more volatile. We've seen fertilizer prices, specifically urea, spike by over 50% in a single month due to conflicts thousands of miles away. We are operating in a price-taker market where your costs are set by global energy wars, and your sales are set by aggregate global supply, leaving you with zero bargaining power. So, why are you being squeezed? It's not because you're a bad manager. It's because the industrial model of high-input, high-volume commodity production has reached a biological and economic cliff. The platform isn't just hot, it's gone. If you continue to play the game by the old rules, hoping for a price rally that may never come or a subsidy that only inflates your costs, you are effectively planning for insolvency. But there is a way off the platform. There is a strategy that moves you from volume to value, from being a victim of the squeeze to a master of your margins. To find it, we have to look deeper into the machinery of this crisis. We have to understand exactly how the value you create is being siphoned off before it ever reaches your bank account. And that starts with understanding the biological cliff, the moment where adding more input no longer yields more profit, but only more debt. So why is this happening? Why does a ton of urea or a new planter stay at record highs even when the market is telling you that corn is worth 20% less than it was 2 years ago? To understand the why, we have to look at a fundamental breakdown in the agricultural economy, something we call the decoupling trap. Historically, agriculture followed a somewhat predictable rhythm. When commodity prices dropped, the demand for inputs softened and prices for seed, chemicals, and fertilizer eventually followed the market down. It wasn't perfect, but the cycle eventually reset. But that cycle is broken. Today, your costs are no longer driven by your demand. They are driven by global industrial supply chains and energy markets that don't care about the price of a bushel in America's heartland. Think about the chemicals you sprayed this spring. Over the last decade, general inflation across the entire U.S. economy rose by about 32%. In a rational world, your costs should have stayed somewhere near that line. But they didn't. Agricultural chemical costs surged by a staggering 80%. Machinery costs, they're up 63%. We aren't just dealing with inflation. We are dealing with a structural decoupling where the industrial tools of your trade have moved into a completely different pricing reality than the commodities you produce. The trap tightens when you look at the debt required to stay in this game. The total farm sector debt has ballooned to over $504 billion. When the Federal Reserve hikes interest rates to cool down the general economy, they are effectively swinging a hammer at your balance sheet. Because modern farming is so capital-intensive, those interest hikes act as a direct tax on your productivity, reducing your ability to service the very loans you need just to get the next crop in the ground. And then, there's the subsidy illusion. You've probably heard the headlines about the $842 billion provided in global agricultural support every year. It sounds like a massive safety net, but here is the cold, hard truth. 2/3 of that money is provided in ways that actually distort the market. Instead of increasing your net income, these payments, often linked to specific inputs or output volumes, simply get leaked. Research shows that as much as 75% of that support doesn't stay with the farmer. It flows straight through your hands and into the pockets of input suppliers and landlords. It inflates the price of the land you rent and the fertilizer you buy, making the support the very thing that keeps your costs artificially high. You are essentially a pass-through entity for a global subsidy regime that prioritizes industrial stability over producer profitability. This is the core of the cost-price squeeze. You are a price taker in a global market. Your output prices are set by aggregate global supply and demand, factors you cannot control, but your input prices are set by concentrated industrial giants who have the bargaining power to keep their margins high even when yours are non-existent. In fact, in many sectors like poultry or seeds, just 5 companies control over 70% of the market. They have the leverage to keep their prices sticky on the way down, while your revenue is as volatile as a summer storm. We've seen this play out in real time. In March of 26, while cereal prices were stagnating, urea prices spiked over 50% in a single month because of geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. Your entire margin can be wiped out by a conflict thousands of miles away before you even hook up the sprayer. You are caught in a system where the productivity growth, the very thing we are told will save us, is actually working against us. We've increased output by nearly 3 times since 1948 without adding more inputs, but that efficiency has just created a global supply overhang that keeps prices low. We are producing more efficiently for less and less return. The platform is burning because the old rules of scale up to survive have led us into a high-input, high-debt trap that is no longer sustainable. But to break the trap, we have to see exactly where the money is leaking out of your specific value chain. We have to look at the middle squeeze and realize that while the agri-food sector is worth trillions, the farm gate is where the value is being drained. The system is built for industrial stability, not producer profitability, and the $1.3 trillion agri-food sector is proof of where that value is going, ready to break the cycle. In Part 2, we're handing you the keys to the 6A framework. Stop taking prices and start making value. See you in the next segment.